Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you every week for almost 9 years on Bright House Cable TV, Channel 49, during prime time, 9:30 p.m. We appreciate you continuing your support of our show, and also we appreciate bringing you the news in the Hispanic community that's really pertinent. I'm here with my co-host, Jose Miranda, who's been with me now for several months, maybe 5 or 6 months, of radio fame. Jose had his own radio show on 8:10 a.m. for a long, long time, and he decided to join the TV side. So welcome again. I'm always welcoming you, and I'll welcome you every time you're on the show, which is every time that we do a show. I want to bring a couple of messages to you. First, I want to show you this booklet. You're looking at the Spanish side of the booklet. This is a book that is about lawyers. If you are looking to hire a lawyer, this book is distributed free of charge in every 7-Eleven, 175 7-Elevens throughout Central Florida. So walk into a 7-Eleven if you're looking for a lawyer, get this book. It tells you how to select a lawyer. It also gives you very pertinent questions to ask about important issues that affect your life. Foreclosure, bankruptcy, and a lot of other things that you need to know before you hire a lawyer. It tells you what to ask a lawyer before you hire them. So the book is actually bilingual. You're looking at the Spanish side, and this is the English side. So the book is split in half, English versus Spanish. You have a great selection of attorneys here. They're all top attorneys. They're not the usual ones you see on billboards. These guys are real hard workers. They're medium-sized law firms that give you very personal attention. So pick up this book in any 7-Eleven throughout Central Florida, English or Spanish. If you're looking for a lawyer, this is where you get your attorney. I also want to show you, again, like I have been doing every week, the Hispanic Achiever license plate. This license plate was created to celebrate the 500-year centennial anniversary of Hispanics settling in Florida. That's right, 500 years ago, 250 years before the United States became the Declaration of Independence, Hispanics were living in Florida. St. Augustine was founded in 1565 by Hispanics. But they landed in Florida, and the guy who landed in Florida, his name was Juan Ponce de Leon. Juan Ponce de Leon landed around Brevard County. They don't know specifically where, but they think it's around Brevard County. And he was Puerto Rican. He came from the island of Puerto Rico. He was the governor of Puerto Rico. And he first got here in 1513, and we're celebrating here right on the license plate. It's the commemorative license plate that has been passed into law by the state legislature. When you get this plate on your car, all the proceeds of this plate go to scholarships for needy minority students in the state of Florida. All the proceeds stay within the state. So, Orgullo de Ser Hispano, get your license plate at any DMV. We also have information about our job fair. We have a job fair coming up. It's June 4th, and it's going to be from 12 noon to 4 p.m. at the Florida Hotel in the Florida Mall. If you're looking for a job, and you need a job, or you know somebody who's looking for a job, or your neighbor is looking for a job, don't hesitate to tell them about the job fair coming up June 4th at the Florida Hotel at the Florida Mall. There's going to be about 35 to 40 employers there that will be hiring. This is not a job fair where people are giving out flyers and there are no jobs. These are actual business opportunities that you can go and submit your resume, or you can collect cards, business cards and phone numbers, and you can actually apply for a job. Okay, so don't miss it. June 4th, which is a Monday, and it's at the Florida Hotel. Jose, how are you?
Good, bro. How you feeling?
I'm doing okay.
I just have one slight issue with
go ahead.
The Hispanics finding Florida.
They didn't find Florida. They settled in Florida.
Well, the thing is, I'm pretty sure that the Indians, they were hanging out.
Well, that's why I say settled.
Waiting.
Settled.
And said, hey, man, who's those guys with the 10 heads landing?
Yeah, well, they were Republicans. Your famous commentary about tin hats, those guys must have been Republicans.
They were Republicans who landed.
Tin hats.
The tin hats.
So, no, those guys, they settled Florida. You know, when we first started this license plate thing, we said, and we looked in the history books,
right.
Junior high school and high school history books. And the history books in Central Florida actually said that they discovered Florida. Well, they discovered the word Florida, but they didn't discover the peninsula of Florida because it was already inhabited.
Right.
So a lot of people had the issue of Well, we got a lot of emails saying, well, you're not supposed to say that because the indigenous people were here first.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then I said, you know what? You're right. They didn't discover Florida.
That's right.
They settled Florida. They did not. They were the first Europeans to settle Florida, but they didn't discover Florida.
But the persons who had the first bodega were the Indians. Okay, so they had their first bodega.
I don't know if they called it a bodega, they may call it a wigwam or something. So listen, Obama and you know, we always cover the situation with Romney and Obama. It's right now it's neck and neck. It's a real horse race.
Yeah.
I'm
sort of surprised.
So am I.
I'm sort of surprised.
But you want to know something? I think that a lot of people on the Obama side are just laying back. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, they're going to come out. They will come out. They got all summer, and he is the incumbent, and he does have a lot of money.
Right.
He has equivalent money, maybe a little bit more than Romney does. But they also are very feverish campaigners, you know?
No, I agree. But they've had a couple of issues lately.
Like what?
They're trying to how to define Romney. Because the president, actually, the president had his rollout this week, in which case he's trying to define what Romney is.
So is everybody else trying to define what Romney is?
And
I don't mean that, you know, in a nasty way. I mean it in a political, nice way.
Right.
Because, you know, when you look on CNN, everybody's trying to figure this guy out.
Right.
You
well,
know?
the president's trying to say the difference between a person who helps investors versus what a president has to do to keep jobs alive for the rest of the Americans.
Well, you know something, I've been watching some of the media, and the question of, you know, you have the governor of Massachusetts said Romney did one thing. He did something positive with the health care.
Right.
He actually backed health care, which is what he's against now for the country.
Right.
But he actually introduced and set up the health care system.
It's what our system is based on.
Yeah, you know, and he was the guy who did it. Now he's saying he doesn't want it. Right. But the reality is that
no one's saying that he doesn't know how to flip flop. He knows how to do flip flops better than most people.
Jose, everybody knows that. Every politician knows how to flip flop when they got to.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm still asking the same question that I asked originally when we started talking about this 5-6 months ago.
Right.
Where's the money?
Yeah, show me the money.
Show me the money that Romney has in the Cayman Islands. How much does he have? Where is it being invested? You know, because what happens is you put your money over there, there's no tracking.
No.
Right? So he can take that money, invest it into Cuba if he wants to. Nobody will know.
Nobody will know.
No, or Venezuela. Right. Buy oil from Venezuela. Right. I'm not saying he's doing that. Right. I'm saying a businessman's a businessman.
Well, and that's part of the issue. He's saying he's a better businessman than Barack Obama,
but you know,
the president.
I don't think that we need
a businessman.
A hardcore businessman.
Okay. You don't think we need somebody who actually knows how to spend money?
I know how to spend money.
Yeah, well, we all do that. Okay. But now, don't forget, we had an issue with the surrogates this week. We had Gerald Ford, who was a former legislator, and who also went against the president, as well as the mayor of Newark, who decided that the business world is okay.
Well, he needs investors to go into Newark.
Well, that's exactly.
You know what I mean?
And so the question is, there are some good things about basic business, isn't there?
I think there's a lot of great things about business. I think, you know, business is what makes the economy go.
Okay.
But I don't think that you can, in my opinion, run a nation
based on that.
Based upon hardcore capitalistic principles.
Okay.
You know, and that's my problem with Romney. Romney is a guy who is so business that, you know, his famous statement, I don't have to worry about the poor, they have a net.
Absolutely.
You know, that to me was probably a shock. I mean, I almost fell off my chair that someone running for president of the United States would actually say something like that.
Yeah, but the polls will show you that most Republicans who left the polling booths, those above 2%, passed overwhelmingly in favor of Romney. Everybody below that figure did not hold them to that issue. Everybody else, you know, said this guy had issues. So the top 1 or 2% of the country thinks he's
the top 1 or 2% economically?
Yes.
Well, of course.
They feel fine with
Of course,
Romney
because they're going to protect. Romney gets in. Look, what I'm afraid of with Romney, we have a military-industrial complex here.
Right.
That there are hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are spent based upon who's president.
Okay.
If you have an active, aggressive military president like Bush,
Right.
okay, and Vice President Cheney, I mean, the Halliburton situation benefited to the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars were benefited from the war in Iraq. You know, so there are people that support the industrial complex under the concept of jobs.
Okay.
Okay, let's go invade a country because it's going to cause jobs.
Right.
Okay,
That's true.
we still don't know what the heck we were doing in Iraq. The guy never had any military weapons, and I still think that the government of the United States actually knew that they didn't have weapons of mass destruction when they went in. I think it was a whole move to prop up the economy, spend trillions of dollars into continue the war zone. And because, you know, in the 9/11 thing was all Saudis, you know.
Yeah.
They were all from Saudi Arabia. So what the hell do we attack Iraq for? And the Afghanistan situation, you know what I mean? And we were in Iraq. So, and then we leave Iraq. We didn't gain anything by it, not really, except for thousands of dead U.S. soldiers. Okay, and now we're still in Afghanistan, which Obama is pulling out.
He's got to find a way out.
No, he's pulling out.
Well, Romney would keep us there at least another 10 years.
I think Romney would, the Romney team would reactivate the concept that we have to go stay there, like you just said, in order to protect the interests of stability in the Middle East. You know what I mean? So and that would cause,
which will be the poppy seeds too.
Yeah, you notice you don't see Cheney around anymore. You don't see George Bush. You don't see any of those guys that were all let's go to war around anymore. Yeah. You know, they don't want to taint Romney, but Romney's their boy. Yeah. You know, and I got a big problem with that. I got a big problem. As soon as I found out that this guy had $200 million hidden in foreign banks, while small businesses and the banks here were collapsing. And small businesses were saying that the banks didn't have any money to lend them because there were no big depositors, and Romney was keeping his money abroad. I mean, how can a president, somebody who runs for president of the United States, invest his money abroad when his country that he wants to be president of is suffering?
But I think that what Romney's trying to portray is that business and the fact of going the business mantle, how to do stuff, is the way to have the country move forward, by taking away every single sliver of regulation that allows every banker and everybody that turns money hands-free, that somehow, by the time they get through, not only will we be in our birthday suits, but the whole world will be happy, except for these 1 or 2%.
The 1%.
They'll be fine because they'll be closed.
You know, one of the things that I was, you know, where everybody talks about the recovery, and how can the stock market be doing so well, and we still have unemployment? We have a jobless recovery, you know, and people don't realize what everybody's. Well, how can you have a jobless recovery? And people, I don't hear them talking about that on the news a lot. You know what I mean? So,
and we've had growth, continuous growth every month since this man has been president of the United States. Okay, so that it's a factual thing. You can see in numbers. But what I love most about the Republican parties, and even some people on the left, is their ability to do math. And they have a lot of programs out there that teach science and math answers on how to do them. This Congress epitomizes either the most stupidest people under the sun that have been doing business in Washington for the last 20 years, or the rest of us are just blind as a bat.
You know, it's what brought this whole thing out was that the country did falter, or else these stupid people, a lot of them, and I don't mind saying it, and you said it, there's a lot of congressmen that, you know, a box of hammers has more sense than they do.
Absolutely.
And they're in there because they had the money to campaign, or they were around, you know, they had the time to invest in there. But the reality is they don't know what the hell they're doing. And they made their mistakes, and the mistakes were covered up because we were such a powerful country economically that we could absorb the hits. But we're no longer that.
No, we can't.
We can't take those hits anymore. So when you look at a jobless recovery, what does a jobless recovery mean? The stock market is doing well. Who's that? I don't own any stock. That's the 1%, the 2%, the top 5.
Although I was tempted for the social network to spend $38 on a bond there.
On the Facebook?
On Facebook.
No, I don't like anything that's not manufactured, man. I want to see the hard stuff. Those things go up and down like you wouldn't believe.
They were going to lose. They were going to lose stock right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And for some snafus, and some people had to step in and buy up a lot of stock
in order to keep it up.
And keep this man at $19 million profit.
Yeah, he wants to go to Saigon or something.
Yeah,
so you know, it's very simple. The jobless recovery. The stock market, does the stock market really reflect who the American people are? No. The stock market is controlled and run by wealthy people. Okay? Because only wealthy people have enough money to put in to a stock market because they don't need that money to eat. Or they don't need that money to pay for the car or the mortgage. So the stock market is actually run and controlled and invested with people that have extra money. Okay? That's that top 10%. Okay? So the stock market is recovering because major corporations
are investing.
They're fired all their workforce in the United States.
True. They got nobody else.
So they're going to Mexico, and those iconic products that were U.S. products 15 years ago that have been in the market. I remember I saw a toothpaste product that was in the market. I was a kid. My father had a grocery store. Okay? And I grew up in that grocery store.
So you're the one.
I'm the one. So I used to sleep on bags of rice because I'd be in there till, you know, we'd be in there 15, 16 hours a day. If I wanted to sleep, you go in the back, you know, and you sleep on some bags of rice, and then you get up and you go back to the counter. But, you know, those iconic brands that I used to, as a kid, when I was 10 years old, I used to put on the shelves. You know, we used to empty the box, put on the shelves. All of those iconic brands that were U.S. made, they were made in Ohio, they were made in Massachusetts, they're all made in either Mexico and China. So all of a sudden, that 1% that controls that company, or the top executives in that company, have tripled their wealth, quadrupled their wealth, because now they're paying some guy 65 cents an hour instead of paying an American worker minimum wage to make the product. So we have lost the jobs. That toothpaste company lost those jobs. Okay? Those jobs went to Mexico. The difference between the 65 cents an hour and the $8 an hour is going into the 1% pocket. So they are making tons of money while they're firing American workers. So that's the jobless recovery. That's the definition of a jobless recovery. You know, American companies have gone global in order to maximize their profits for their stockholders, and they've left the American worker virtually, you know, unprotected without work. You know?
Now, you've had some personal dealings with some of these companies.
Yeah, I have.
Specifically with AT&T, you had an issue with?
No, that was another issue that I just had today, which I was really, really upset with. But my whole peeve about these companies are that not only do they lose the American worker, okay, but now budgets that were previously allocated to minority communities are being tremendously cut. Because before, you had a plant with workers that were making from $8 to $12 an hour. A lot of minorities, factory workers. Okay? Those guys are gone. So now all of a sudden, the guys in the ivory towers don't need to be nice to those communities, to the minorities. So all of that scholarship money is starting to go away. All of that money to help those communities on social programs that were corporate sponsored is going away because that's not needed anymore. So not only are they saving $8 plus an hour or $10 an hour per hour per worker, but they're also cutting the budgets of the minorities. So basically what's happening is we are sliding back to pre-civil rights times. Okay? Because all of those inroads that were made in the 1960s and 50s for equality and were enacted in the 70s and 80s to help minorities grow and get into the system. And now, those things are starting to disintegrate.
Are these Democrats that are causing this, or the 10 hat people doing this?
These guys are just, I don't ask if they're Republican or Democrat. They're just unbridled capitalists that, you know, what they want to do is grab the bag of money and run, and whatever debris is left behind, which is what I'm afraid of Romney. He's a guy who just, okay, we go in, we're going to see what we need to strip out of this place to make money. We strip it down. If it doesn't stay afloat, then we sink it. and walk away with whatever. And that's what scares me about Romney.
Yeah, they're going to make money no matter what.
They're going to make, their goal is to make money regardless of the social consequences.
Okay.
Okay, and that's what bothers the hell out of me, what's going on with major corporations right now.
You think corporations are going away totally from social, it sounds like we're talking about socialism, but talking about caring for the little guy, we've moved past that concept, and it's like,
well, let me put it to you this way. Let me put it to you this way. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, Hispanics and blacks had made tremendous inroads into major corporations. Okay? One of the domains that they participated in was diversity departments. A major corporation would have a diversity department. What does that mean? That means that they had a guy who was in charge of making sure that their company properly treated Asians, blacks, Hispanics, women. That was that guy's job, because no matter what, during the human endeavor, you treat people differently. Guys who are in charge treat people differently. So we went through an era during the civil rights movement of 40 years where all of a sudden you have a Hispanic guy in charge of a diversity department. He's vice president of diversity. He reports directly to the president of the company because that's how important the issue was. Or an Afro-American would be the vice president of, or global vice president of a global conglomerate of diversity. And those diversity issues and that knowledge was taken to third world countries. So they were showing off their black or their Hispanic to third world countries, saying, hey, you know what? We're an American company, but look at our executives. They look like you. Okay? I know from direct one-to-one experience, for example, a Fortune 100 company a year and a half ago had an Afro-American reporting directly to the president of that company. Okay? He no longer reports to the president. He reports to another guy who's not a minority, and then the minority guy reports to the president. So now they took the budget decision-making power away from that Afro-American, and they gave it to a non-minority who makes the decision just strictly on the money. They don't care. They don't really are looking at social consequences. They're not looking at the needs of the employees, because the employees are now in Mexico or they're in China.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that guy has been demoted based upon the globalization process and the diversity situation. And I've had in the past weeks direct exposure to specific situations in major corporations where blacks and Hispanics are being stripped of their decision-making ability based upon the globalization of the workforce and large American companies leaving the United States manufacturing process.
Is this something that we can turn around, or is this a recent phenomenon, or something that's going to go on forever? I
think that there has to come an awakening. You know, the other part is, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it because, you know, that's what we do here, okay? The leaders of the civil rights movement, with the exception of Martin Luther King that nobody could buy off, okay, we have leaders of the civil rights movement whose goal was to bring the people up. Well, what happened is they went up. A lot of the people are still down. So those guys who are leaders of the civil rights movement became extremely affluent because they got hired as consultants, because they got given franchises for major products in the United States, so they became rich. So they're not out there pounding the pavement anymore. You know what I mean? They're just not there. You know, all of those, there was dozens of them, leaders. They're not, you don't see somebody going out and saying, why isn't this company doing this anymore? You don't see that. You'll see civil rights where, you know, the Martin case, okay? But you don't see things that have to do with other types of injustices that have to do with economics, okay? You don't even see them going into their own community and trying to stop drugs. Okay. The biggest killer in the black and Hispanic community is drugs. These guys don't speak out against drugs, but they'll speak out, and I'm not saying wrong or right, but they speak out about an incident that happens to one person. But 150 people may die a day out of drugs that are being brought into the community, and they don't do anything about that. Okay. So we're going through a tremendous social change. And like I said, I deal with major corporations every day. I've had to adjust our nonprofit organization in order to survive this tsunami of social change and attitude of major corporations. And, you know, the Wall Street movement is valid, but the Wall Street movement has no teeth. They don't do anything. They march, you know. They don't actually do something that will cause a reaction coming the other way.
It's just, we see it every day, and especially when we had the Wall Street movement and stuff, the concerns of the movement. Is this something out of fear that they don't go forward anymore, or is this?
You're talking about the Wall Street people?
Yeah, or you know, the protests that we need to continue the protests to make people keep aware of all the changes that are happening, and the fact that a lot of our businesses are overseas. How do we get that back?
You're not going to get that back. You know, what you may get is small industries, a rebirth of small industries that slowly start up again and start attacking consumer opportunities and use the fact that these guys have left the country and have no social consciousness in the United States in order to open up the market. Mm-hmm. If I was a guy, I'd come out with a product. I know 2 or 3 products that the door is open, that you can go into minority communities and start manufacturing a product, sell it to minorities, and say, why are you giving them the money? Let's keep the money here. Right. You know, that kind of movement. That's actually what should be done. But again, where does the money come from to do that? So the minority leaders have dissipated, so there's nobody to take action to help develop the funding for that. So
is this something, with the few minutes that we have left here, is there something, can we definitely point to a specific company or companies that are hurting the Hispanic
Listen,
culture?
I can point to a lot of companies, okay, that if it's strategically done, it would affect their bottom line. The higher you go, the more vulnerable you are to the right. You know, it's like taking down a building. You put the dynamite in the right place, and one stick can bring down the building. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those companies are really vulnerable to the consumer U.S. marketplace. There is no question, but nobody's doing anything about it. Listen, Jose, I want to just say, go back to the plate because we only got a couple of minutes left. Mm-hmm. Don't forget the job fair, Monday, June 4th, the job fair at the Florida Hotel from 12 to 4. It's going to be a good job fair. If you're looking for a job, Hispanic Achievers are going to help you find a job. We can't find jobs for everybody, but we are very socially conscious that this is the right thing to do. Come to the job fair, and if you don't find something there, we will send out your resume to all the employers, over 1,200 employers that we have in our computers. So please go to the job fair and sign up on June 4th at the Florida Hotel. Again, the Hispanic Achiever license plate, all the money goes to scholarships. Every plate that you get on your car, that everybody gets on their car, that money is state regulated under state law and must go to nonprofit scholarship programs throughout the state of Florida. And the last thing again, the lawyer's directory, 7-Eleven stores, you need a lawyer. Don't react to just a guy who has a pretty face or gives you a line. This tells you hardcore information on how to hire a lawyer. Okay,
Don't forget to vote.
Huh?
Don't forget to get out there and vote.
Yeah, you got to, listen, proactive. You got to, you know, be very, very conscious of what's going on in the community. Jose, anything you want to, oh yeah, www.hispanicachievers.org. Yep. That's our website. You want to know any information about a free Christian concert we're having, call 407-271-1007. 407-271-1007. And also for you guys who are business-oriented and community-oriented, who are also Christians, we have a chaplaincy program that you might be interested in. Also call the same number, 407-271-1007. This is Danny Ramos and Jose Miranda. We will see you next week, every week here on Bright House Cable, and we're going to be broadcasting in Tampa starting in about a month. See you next week. Thank you very much for joining us.